I still am not willing to concede that the U.S. is going to pull out of NATO, in part because our Congress, which has not exactly been a beacon of political strength in standing up to Trump these last couple of months, the Congress is beginning to raise its head above the parapet just a little bit. And senior Republican members in the House and Senate, I think, are going to push back against a total withdrawal from Europe or somehow leaving NATO because they know it's in our interest. It's in our economic interest as well as our security interest. So I don't think we're going to see a total pullout.
Then um, we bumped into each other a number of times at conferences over the years and watched what we thought was a progressive trend towards a belligerent Russia destabilizing the Euro-Atlantic. Can you quite believe the pace at which everything has happened over the last 2 years? And more so, the place we're at now, where it feels like it's the US and Russia who are on one page and the rest of Europe on another.
James, never in my life did I imagine we would be where we are right now with the government of the United States taking, number one, taking the side of Russia in anything. Stand fast, space cooperation in the past, and even during Cold War, doing those kinds of things. But taking the side of the Kremlin against Ukraine and looking to bring Vladimir Putin back into the sort of the responsible international community for apparently economic reasons. I didn't imagine that. I didn't imagine that the United States would ever be uh, threatening, in a way, NATO allies like Canada or Denmark um, with respect to Greenland. So no, it's hard for me to accept it and understand the reasons behind it.
I wonder if, there will have been plenty of us who were concerned that the kind of threat to NATO of Trump 1 and certainly Trump 2 was a reduced commitment from the US in terms of its military resourcing of the alliance. But it feels to me that there's something slightly more existential at play for the alliance, because the chat that I am hearing is that US senior commanders in Europe are no longer allowed to call Russia an adversary publicly, and that within NATO, there is a lot of nervousness now about referring to Russia in those terms for fear of annoying the White House. Now, NATO found a role for itself at a time when Russia wasn't the belligerent and it was countering violent extremism that was the challenge. But fundamentally, at a time when Russia is being aggressive within Europe, that sort of that inability to call Russia the adversary feels really dangerous.
So part of the reason that Europe was so slow, has been so slow in rearming itself and taking the necessary steps to build up defense industry and have proper deterrence was because of the failure to acknowledge that Russia was in fact a threat. Because if you publicly acknowledge something's a threat, you have to do something about it. So fortunately, most European countries, including UK, of course, are very clear that Russia is the aggressor here against Ukraine, that Russia is a threat to all the nations of Europe, and the international rules-based order that we have all grown up under the last several decades. The fact that apparently the U.S. is unable or unwilling to use that same sort of clarity is, of course, it's very troubling. Now, I don't have any problem. I'm not confused about who the bad guy is here, of course, but I'm also an old retired guy. Um, but Europe should not hesitate to be clear about what the threat is. And in fact, Europe may have to help Ukraine and also defend against Russia without strong or even significant U.S. help. I've been unsuccessful at predicting exactly what the Trump administration is going to do on certain things. There's nothing that they do that is a straight line logic that we would all recognize. Um, the Trump administration, of course, is correct that allies have not, and this is not about 2%, this is about actual capability and industry and the resilience necessary to deal with modern threat. not just Russia, but China and others. So he's correct, as were every one of his predecessors going back to Harry Truman, that many of our allies have not done that. Again, UK that's never been a problem for UK, although I know it's quite difficult at times to produce the capabilities that UK needs. I think, having said all that, I still am not willing to concede that the U.S. is going to pull out of NATO, in part because our Congress, which has not exactly been a beacon of political strength in standing up to Trump these last couple of months, the Congress is beginning to raise its head above the parapet just a little bit. And senior Republican members in the House and Senate, I think, are going to push back against a total withdrawal from Europe or somehow leaving NATO, because they know it's in our interest. It's in our economic interest as well as our security interest. So I don't think we're going to see a total pullout.
A couple of weeks ago, Heather Conley, the former US Assistant Secretary of State in the George W. Bush State Department, offered a really interesting reflection, which is that Trump's form from his first presidency, when trying to solve the world's big problems, back then North Korea, was that if it doesn't work out, if the belligerent just kind of kicks the can down the road and stretches things out to the point of nothingness, Trump doesn't become angry and frustrated and turn the tables on the belligerent. He just gets bored and moves on. Now, I've heard others reflect that won't be the case, that Trump is desperate to secure a legacy. This is his second presidency. There won't be another. And thus, if Putin does mess him around, he will lose patience and seek to secure a legacy in a different way that is more antagonistic to Russia. Which of those two camps do you think you're drawn to?
Something a little bit in the middle. I think First, I will say this, even though I clearly am not a supporter of many of the president's policies or his approach to this, I believe that he is sincere about wanting to stop killing. He has a long record of being against endless wars. So I take him as being sincere about that. I just disagree with the approach, putting it all on Ukraine versus telling Russia, get the hell out of here. He has leverage over Russia that he has never had before. He could do some things that would crush Russia's oil and gas industry. I mean, from stopping shadow fleet vessels that are carrying it out to working with the Saudis to change the market in such a way that there's things he could do. And he could also say to Putin, said, all right, well, you've been messing me around, so I'm giving the Ukrainians everything they want without restriction. So have a nice day. So he could do those things. And I think he does want this deal, and there's no way he could walk away from this. He's put his name all over it. So we'll see. I guess maybe in a weird way, one of the advantages of his style is like he could take a hard left turn or a hard right turn, depending on what he's trying to get to. But when I say I'm kind of in the middle, all they talked about during the campaign was stopping endless wars in China, China, China. I hear not a peep about China in the last 2 months. We are not taking real steps that would bring the war in Ukraine to a close quickly. And we're seeing a lot of kinetic activity in the Middle East. And I think it's going to pick up. So I'm going to keep my eye on Iran, not just Houthis, but Iran and what the U.S. is doing in the region with our allies. Because you were teasing me about lamenting about having only 30,000 U.S. Army in Europe. The fact is, we don't have enough Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and intelligence to do anything by ourselves. The only way it works is with allies. Intelligence sharing, refueling, access, ships at sea, air power, that only happens with allies. And I hope that he does not damage the relationships we have so much that we cannot count on allies or that you stop counting on us.
Well, it is a refreshing thing to hear an American of your seniority and standing say? Because I think there were many Europeans who were affronted by what Peter Hegseth and J.D. Vance said when they came to Brussels and Paris and Munich earlier in the year, and then particularly the reflections of the two of them from this signal group that we've all been exposed to over the year. I think remembering in Washington that the US forces are mighty beyond all others on earth, but that there is value in coalition and allies is a hugely important message right now.
I don't even want to think about doing anything without allies. I mean, the fact that UK allows our Air Force to fly from there, that we depend on naval maintenance and support for protecting our interests, working with allies in the North Sea and in the Atlantic. You just can't do it with all that. And of course, the intelligence sharing between US and UK is legendary. Probably, and so I worry about when I see the incompetence and I'll just leave it at that, of some of our senior intelligence officials, that our friends will begin to hesitate on sharing intelligence with us. And then we're going to find out that it's not just American satellites that provide our intelligence.
Ben, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sparing us your time. You're watching Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. Please tune in to more episodes of Superpowers in the future and subscribe to the Times Radio channel for more of the outstanding geopolitical commentary that exists across Times Radio. For now, thanks very much.